The howl of the winter wind rattled the wooden walls of Zara Olson's small homestead as the first contraction seized her body. It was December 1875, and the blizzard that had descended upon Glenrio, New Mexico, was the worst the territory had seen in decades. Zara gripped the edge of her kitchen table, her knuckles white, breathing through the pain that radiated from her swollen belly. At 23, she was alone in this remote stretch of land, miles from town, her husband Jacob 6 months dead from a mining accident that had left her a widow with a child on the way. The baby wasn't due for another 2 weeks, but it seemed the fierce winter storm had other plans. "Not now," she whispered to her unborn child, one hand pressed against her stomach. "Please, not during this storm." The blizzard outside intensified, snow piling against the windows, the temperature dropping with each passing hour. Zara had prepared as best she could for the birth clean linens, boiled water ready to heat, the small cradle her husband had crafted positioned beside her bed, but she knew the dangers of childbirth. Women died, babies died. And facing it alone in a blizzard with no experienced help terrified her more than anything. Another contraction gripped her, stronger this time. She staggered to the window, peering through frost-covered glass at the white wasteland that had once been her yard. The barn was barely visible through the swirling snow. Her 2 horses and milk cow were secured inside, but that did her little good now. Even if she could make it to town, the journey would be impossible in this weather. "God help me," she murmured, clutching her belly as the contraction subsided. The next one would come sooner. She knew that much from helping at her sister's births years before in Kansas, before she'd followed Jacob west with dreams of their own ranch. As darkness fell, Zara lit the lamps and stoked the fire until the small cabin was warm. The contractions were coming regularly now, every 15 minutes, each one stealing her breath. She paced the wooden floor, remembering what the town's midwife, Mrs. Holloway, had told her about walking to ease the baby's passage. Outside, the wind screamed like a wounded animal, drowning out her own cries of pain when the contractions hit. Snow piled higher against the door. She was truly trapped. Miles away in Glenrio, Tucker Xavier stared out the saloon window at the white chaos engulfing the town. At 28, he'd seen his share of bad weather, but this storm was something else. It had started that morning as light flurries, then exploded into a full-blown blizzard by noon, stranding him and several others in town. "Ain't seen nothing like this since '67, muttered old Sam Gardner, nursing a whiskey beside Tucker. That was the year they found the Johnson family frozen solid in their beds, all 5 of them. Tucker nodded grimly, watching ice form intricate patterns on the glass. He wasn't a drinking man, not anymore, but had stopped into the saloon to warm up before heading back to his small ranch 5 miles east. That plan had evaporated with the worsening storm. Mr. Xavier. The saloon doors burst open, bringing with them a flurry of snow and Sheriff Mills, his mustache and eyebrows frosted white. "Thank God you're here." Tucker stood, instantly alert. He and Mills had ridden together during the war, and the sheriff wasn't a man prone to dramatics. "What's wrong, Everett?" "It's Mrs. Holloway. She's taken bad with pneumonia." The sheriff stomped snow from his boots. "Doc says she won't last the night." Tucker frowned. "I'm sorry to hear it, but what's that got to do with me?" The sheriff removed his hat, crushing it between anxious hands. "Just got word from Ben Parker. He rode in from the South Range before the storm hit worst. Said he passed the Olson place and saw smoke from the chimney." He paused, looking Tucker directly in the eyes. "You know she's expecting, due any day." A chill ran through Tucker that had nothing to do with the draft from the door. Zara Olson. He'd encountered the young widow a few times since arriving in Glenrio 6 months ago. Slender despite her pregnancy, with dark honey-colored hair and eyes that held more sorrow than a woman her age should know. He'd tipped his hat to her in town, helped load supplies into her wagon once. Words were few between them, but he'd noticed her. Hard not to, Mrs. Holloway was supposed to attend her, the sheriff continued. But now, there's no one else, Tucker concluded, understanding dawning. The town's only doctor was elderly and partially crippled with arthritis. The journey to the Olson homestead would likely kill him in this weather. "You're the best rider we've got, Tucker," Sheriff Mills said, not mincing words. "And you know the trails better than anyone, even in bad conditions." The other men in the saloon had fallen silent, watching the exchange. "You're asking me to ride 5 miles in a blizzard to a woman who might not even be in labor," Tucker said slowly. "I'm asking you to save 2 lives," the sheriff countered. "That woman's alone out there. If that baby's coming, she needs help." Tucker stared into his untouched coffee, then out at the raging storm. It was madness to ride in this. Suicide, maybe. But the image of Zara Olson alone, possibly in labor, possibly dying, stirred something deep within him, a responsibility he couldn't ignore. "I'll need supplies," he said finally. "And Mrs. Holloway's birthing bag." Relief washed over the sheriff's face. "Doc's already getting it ready." 20 minutes later, Tucker was mounted on Midnight, his coal-black stallion, the only horse he trusted to navigate through such treacherous conditions. The wind cut through his heavy coat and 2 layers beneath, but he dressed as warmly as possible. Saddlebags were packed with medical supplies, blankets, and emergency rations. "Head due east along the creek bed," Sheriff Mills shouted over the wind, holding Midnight's bridle. "It's more sheltered there. Then north at the Split Oak, what's left of it after that lightning strike. The Olson place is just beyond the rise." Tucker nodded, pulling his scarf higher over his face. "If I'm not back by morning, you will be," the sheriff interrupted. "With good news, God willing." With a final nod, Tucker urged Midnight forward. The horse snorted, reluctant to leave the shelter of the livery, but obeyed. Within moments, they were swallowed by the white void of the blizzard. The wind was merciless, driving snow and ice into Tucker's face despite the scarf. He kept Midnight at a steady pace. Too slow meant freezing to death. Too fast risked injury on the treacherous terrain. He counted his heartbeats, focusing on staying oriented when all landmarks had vanished under the snow. An hour into the journey, Tucker was questioning his sanity. His fingers, despite thick gloves, were numb. Ice had formed on his eyelashes, and every breath sent shards of pain through his lungs. But he pressed on, guided by an instinct deeper than reason. "Come on, boy," he murmured to Midnight, who trudged valiantly through snow drifts, nearly reaching his chest in places. "She needs us." In the small cabin, Zara was losing track of time. The contractions were coming faster now, every 5 minutes, each one a wave of pain that left her gasping. She had positioned herself on the bed, propped against pillows, blankets beneath her. Her nightgown was soaked with sweat despite the chill creeping into the cabin as the fire burned low. "I can do this," she told herself, her voice sounding strange and distant in the empty room. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But fear clutched at her heart. Something felt wrong. The pain was concentrated strangely, not like what her mother and sister had described. And there was a pressure, a terrible bearing down sensation that made her want to push even though she knew it was too soon. A particularly vicious contraction ripped through her, and Zara couldn't hold back a scream. As it subsided, she became aware of another sound, a pounding at her door, nearly lost in the howl of the wind. At first, she thought she'd imagined it, but there it was again, insistent knocking. With tremendous effort, Zara pulled herself from the bed during a moment's reprieve between contractions. She staggered to the door, one hand bracing against her belly, the other fumbling with the latch. The door burst open, snow swirling in, along with a figure so covered in ice and snow they hardly looked human. "Mrs. Olson," a deep voice rasped from behind layers of frozen scarf. "It's Tucker Xavier. Sheriff sent me." Relief washed over Zara so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Another contraction seized her, and she did fall then, crying out as the pain took her breath away. Strong arms caught her, lifting her easily despite her swollen state. Through a haze of pain, she felt herself being carried back to the bed. "The baby," she managed to gasp as Tucker laid her down. "It's coming." Tucker's heart hammered against his ribs as he looked at the woman writhing in pain before him. He'd made it by some miracle, but now faced a challenge far more daunting than the blizzard. He knew horses, cattle, even delivered a foal or two, but a human baby. His hands trembled as he peeled off his frozen layers. "Mrs. Holloway is sick," he explained, moving quickly to stoke the dying fire. "I brought her supplies. Sheriff said you might need help. Mrs. Holloway." Zara's face crumpled in disappointment, then contorted with another contraction. I need. "I know," Tucker said, trying to sound calmer than he felt. "And I'm going to help you, I promise." The next hour was a blur of activity. Tucker had never worked so quickly in his life. He built up the fire until the cabin was warm again. He boiled water, laid out the clean cloths from Mrs. Holloway's bag, arranged the mysterious instruments whose purpose he could only guess at. All while Zara alternated between moments of clear-headed direction and overwhelming pain. "Have you done this before?" she asked during a brief respite, her face flushed, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Tucker, rolling up his sleeves after washing his hands thoroughly in hot water as instructed, hesitated. "Can't say that I have, madam." A weak laugh escaped her. "Neither have I." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a shared recognition of the absurdity and gravity of their situation. Then her face contorted again as another contraction took hold. "It's getting worse," she gasped when she could speak again. "And I feel like I need to push." Tucker swallowed hard, opening Mrs. Holloway's birthing book with hands that weren't quite steady. "Let me check how you're doing, if that's all right." At Zara's nod, he performed the examination as clinically as he could, following the book's instructions, his face burning with embarrassment despite the circumstances. What he saw made his stomach drop. "Mrs. Olson," he said carefully, "I think the baby might be turned wrong way. I can see." "Well, it looks like an arm." Terror flashed across Zara's face. "A breech birth," Tucker nodded grimly. "The book says we need to try to turn the baby." The next half hour was the most harrowing of Tucker's life. Following the midwife's written instructions, he attempted to guide the baby into the proper position while Zara endured pain that had her screaming until her voice gave out. Nothing seemed to be working, and Tucker was beginning to fear the worst when Zara grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me," she panted, her eyes clear and determined despite her exhaustion. "My mother was a midwife back in Kansas. She told me if this happens, sometimes you can reach in and find the feet, turn the baby that way." Tucker hesitated. "The book doesn't mention, forget the book." Zara's grip tightened. "This baby is coming, wrong way or not. We have to try." Tucker took a deep breath and nodded. Following Zara's gasped instructions, he reached in, gently exploring until he found tiny feet. With more care than he'd ever exercised in his life, he guided those feet downward while Zara pushed with what little strength she had left. "That's it," he encouraged, his voice steadier than he felt. "I can see the feet now. Next contraction, push hard as you can." Zara bore down with a strength that amazed him. Slowly, incredibly, the baby began to emerge feet first, then tiny legs, then the torso. "Almost there," Tucker said, supporting the baby's body with one hand while the other helped guide the head. The most dangerous part of a breech delivery, according to both the book and Zara's hurried instructions. With a final, tremendous push from Zara and careful guidance from Tucker, the baby's head emerged. A moment of terrifying silence followed, then a thin, indignant wail filled the cabin. "It's a boy," Tucker announced, his voice cracking with emotion he hadn't expected. "A strong boy." Tears streamed down Zara's face as Tucker quickly tied off the umbilical cord as the book instructed, then cleaned the baby with warm water and wrapped him in a clean blanket. When he placed the squalling infant on Zara's chest, the look of wonder and love that transformed her exhausted face struck him like a physical blow. "Hello, little one," she whispered, running a finger over the baby's red, wrinkled face. "You picked quite a night to arrive." Outside, the blizzard raged on, but in the warmth of the cabin, a miracle had occurred. Tucker Xavier, who had ridden through hell to reach this place, stood back, watching mother and child, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. "Thank you," Zara said, looking up at him with eyes shining with tears. "You saved us both." Tucker shook his head, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He turned away, busying himself with cleaning up, giving Zara privacy to nurse her son for the first time. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Tucker kept the fire roaring against the bitter cold outside. He prepared a simple broth for Zara from supplies in her kitchen, helped her clean up, and checked regularly for any signs of bleeding or fever that the midwife's book warned could be fatal. By dawn, the blizzard had blown itself out. Weak winter sunlight filtered through the frost-covered windows. The baby, whom Zara had named William Jacob after her late husband and father, was sleeping peacefully in the cradle Tucker had moved beside her bed. Zara dozed fitfully, exhausted but alive. Tucker stood at the window, watching the transformed landscape, blindingly white and pristine. The danger wasn't over. They were still isolated, with limited supplies, and Zara was weak from the difficult birth. But they had made it through the night. "You should rest," came Zara's soft voice from the bed. Tucker turned to find her watching him, her honey-colored hair spread across the pillow, her face pale but serene. "I'm fine," he assured her. "Been through worse during the war." "Nevertheless," she insisted, "there's a cot in the storage room. I insist you use it. You've earned your rest, Mr. Xavier." Tucker hesitated, then nodded. "I'll check on the animals first, make sure your livestock survived the night." He bundled up and trudged through waist-deep snow to the small barn. The animals were cold but alive: 2 horses, a milk cow, and a few chickens huddled together for warmth. He fed and watered them, then returned to the cabin, stamping snow from his boots. "All present and accounted for," he reported, removing his coat. "Though that barn roof's going to need some patching come spring. Snow's weighing it down something fierce." Zara nodded, adjusting her position with a wince of pain. "I've been meaning to fix it. Jacob always." She trailed off, her eyes clouding with memory. Tucker cleared his throat. "I could take a look at it before I head back to town, once the trails clear some." "That's very kind, but you've done more than enough already." She glanced at the sleeping baby. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Nothing to repay," Tucker said firmly. "Any decent man would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. Riding through that blizzard had been a near-suicide mission. Many men would have decided that 2 lives weren't worth risking their own. The next 3 days passed in a strange, peaceful routine. The snow was still too deep for Tucker to safely make the journey back to town, so he stayed, sleeping on the cot in the storage room, helping Zara with the baby and the chores she couldn't manage while recovering. They talked at first awkwardly, then with increasing ease. Tucker learned that Zara had come west from Kansas 2 years earlier with her husband Jacob, full of dreams for their own ranch. Jacob had taken work in the mines to save money for cattle and equipment, only to die in a cave 6 months before. Zara had stayed on their small homestead, determined to make a life for herself and her unborn child. In turn, Tucker shared parts of his own story, his time as a cavalry officer during the war, his years driving cattle from Texas to Kansas, and finally his purchase of a small ranch outside Glenrio just 6 months earlier. "Why here?" Zara asked on the third evening as they sat before the fire, the baby sleeping in her arms. "Most people are heading to California these days." Tucker stared into the flames. "Wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere I could start fresh, running from something." There was no judgment in her voice, only curiosity. He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "In a manner of speaking. Bad memories, mostly. Lost my wife and daughter to cholera in '71, down in Texas." Zara's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry." "Been moving ever since," he continued, surprised at himself for sharing something he rarely spoke of. "Never staying one place too long. Until Glenrio. Something about this place made me want to put down roots again." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the baby's occasional soft sounds. On the fourth day, the temperature rose enough to begin melting the snow. Tucker knew he should return to town. People would be worried, and Zara likely wanted her privacy back, but he found himself inventing reasons to stay. The barn roof needed temporary repairs. The woodpile needed restocking. The well had frozen and needed thawing. Zara didn't object. In truth, she dreaded being alone again. Tucker's steady presence had become a comfort, his quiet competence a reassurance when little William fussed or when her own strength faltered. She watched him from the window as he chopped wood, his breath clouding in the cold air, and felt something stir within her that she hadn't expected to feel again after Jacob's death. On the fifth day, Tucker announced at breakfast that he would ride into town. "The trail should be passable now," he explained, not quite meeting her eyes. "Sheriff Mills will be wondering if we survived, and you probably need proper supplies." Zara nodded, ignoring the sinking feeling in her chest. "Of course, and Mrs. Holloway, if she's recovered, might want to check on William and me." "I'll make a list of what you need," Tucker said, rising from the table. "Anything special for the little one?" Zara smiled down at her son, nursing contentedly. "Just the basics. We're simple folk." An hour later, Tucker was saddling Midnight. Zara stood in the doorway, William bundled against her chest, watching as he secured the cinch. "Mr. Xavier," she called as he prepared to mount. "I want to thank you again, not just for coming that night but for staying, for everything." Tucker turned, his expression unreadable beneath his hat brim. "It was nothing, Mrs. Olson. It was everything," she corrected softly, "and please call me Zara." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Zara, then, and I'm Tucker." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary before Tucker swung into the saddle. With a tip of his hat, he turned Midnight toward town and rode away, leaving Zara standing in the doorway, watching until horse and rider disappeared over the ridge. The town of Glenrio welcomed Tucker Xavier as if he'd returned from the dead. Word of his daring ride had spread, and by the time he reached the main street, a small crowd had gathered. Sheriff Mills was the first to greet him, clasping his arm with visible relief. "Thought we'd lost you in that blizzard," the sheriff said. "Mrs. Olson and the baby, both well," Tucker reported, dismounting stiffly. 5 days of hard work after the punishing ride had left him sore. "A boy. She named him William." A cheer went up from the gathered townsfolk. Mrs. Holloway, looking frail but recovered enough to be on her feet, pushed through the crowd. "Tell me everything," she demanded, her professional concern evident. "Was it a difficult birth? Any complications?" Tucker described the breech delivery as clinically as possible, earning an approving nod from the midwife. "You did well, Mr. Xavier. Not many men would have kept their heads in such a situation." She patted his arm. "I'll ride out tomorrow to check on them both, but it sounds like you handled things admirably." Tucker accepted the praise awkwardly, uncomfortable with the attention. After providing the sheriff with a list of supplies Zara needed, he headed for the bathhouse, eager to wash away 5 days of grime and collect his thoughts. Later, sitting in the hotel dining room with a hot meal before him, Tucker found his mind continuously drifting back to the small cabin and its occupants. He'd been gone less than a day, and already he felt an inexplicable pull to return. The realization troubled him. He hadn't felt anything like this since Elizabeth died, and he wasn't sure he welcomed it now. "Mind if I join you?" Sheriff Mills approached his table, coffee in hand. At Tucker's nod, he sat. "Town's talking about nothing but your heroics." Tucker grimaced. "Rather they wouldn't." "Get used to it. It's not every day someone rides through a blizzard to deliver a baby." The sheriff studied him over the rim of his cup. "Something on your mind, Tucker?" Tucker pushed his barely touched food around his plate. "Just wondering about Mrs. Olson's situation. She's alone out there. Baby to care for, homestead to run." "It's a tough spot, no doubt," Mills agreed. "Some folks have tried to persuade her to sell up and move into town since her husband passed, but she's stubborn, determined to make a go of that place. She mentioned wanting to raise cattle eventually." "Did she now?" The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "That's a tall order for a woman alone, even one as capable as Zara Olson." Tucker nodded, his mind working. What if she had help? The next morning, Tucker loaded a wagon with supplies for Zara and William. Besides the necessities she'd requested, he'd added a few extras: quality coffee, some preserved fruits, a soft blanket for the baby that had caught his eye in the general store. As he prepared to leave town, Mrs. Holloway approached with her medical bag. "I'll ride out with you, if you don't mind the company. Best I check on mother and child sooner rather than later." Tucker helped the elderly midwife onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. The journey to the Olson homestead was slow but pleasant, the winter landscape glistening in the sunlight, the worst of the snow already melting into the thirsty ground. Mrs. Holloway chattered amiably about past difficult births she'd attended, seeming to have no awareness of Tucker's growing nervousness as they approached the small cabin. Why should he be nervous? He was simply delivering supplies and the midwife. Yet his heart beat faster as they crested the final rise and the homestead came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Tucker felt relief at this sign of life. As the wagon drew nearer, the door opened, and Zara appeared, William cradled in one arm. Her face lit up at the sight of them, and Tucker felt something twist in his chest. "Mrs. Holloway," she called, stepping out into the yard, "and Mr. Xavier, what a pleasant surprise." Tucker helped Mrs. Holloway down from the wagon, then began unloading supplies while the midwife fussed over Zara and the baby. He carried the provisions inside, placing them on the kitchen table, acutely aware of the familiar surroundings. Had it really been only a day since he'd left? The cabin looked different, somehow brighter, more alive. Zara had tidied up, arranged wildflowers in a jar on the table, and the baby's things were neatly organized near the cradle. It struck Tucker how quickly the place had transformed from a shelter in a storm to a home. "He's thriving," Mrs. Holloway announced after examining William. "And you're healing well, my dear. Mr. Xavier must have taken good care of you both." Zara's eyes met Tucker's briefly, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. He was a godsend. The midwife stayed for an hour, giving Zara advice on nursing and infant care, checking her recovery and promising to return in a week. When it was time to leave, Tucker found himself reluctant to go. "I can stay and chop more wood," he offered, "or fix that leak in the barn I noticed." Mrs. Holloway eyed him knowingly. "I'm sure Mrs. Olson would appreciate the help, but I need to get back before dark. My old bones can't take another night away from my own bed." Caught in his transparent excuse, Tucker hesitated. "You're welcome to stay," Zara said quietly. "There's plenty of work if you're offering, and I'd appreciate the company." Decision made. Tucker helped Mrs. Holloway into the wagon and handed her the reins. "You know the way back to town." "Been traveling these roads longer than you've been alive, young man," the midwife said with a sniff, though her eyes twinkled with amusement. "Don't worry about me." In a lower voice she added, "She's a fine woman, Mr. Xavier. Don't be a fool about it." Tucker watched the wagon until it disappeared, then turned to find Zara standing nearby, William sleeping against her shoulder. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "Wanted to," he replied simply. "That roof won't fix itself." They fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. Tucker rose early, tended the animals, and worked on repairs around the homestead. Zara cared for William, prepared meals, and gradually resumed lighter chores as her strength returned. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked sometimes about practical matters like the spring planting or the possibility of acquiring a few cattle, sometimes about deeper things like their hopes and losses. A week passed, then two. Tucker told himself he stayed because Zara needed help, because the winter was harsh, and a woman alone with a newborn shouldn't have to fend for herself. But the truth, which he was slowly beginning to acknowledge, was that he stayed because being there felt right in a way nothing had for years. One evening in late January, with William asleep in his cradle, Zara broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "People will talk," she said quietly, mending a shirt by lamplight while Tucker whittled a small wooden horse. "If they aren't already." Tucker's hand stilled. "Does that bother you?" "It should," she admitted. "A widow with a man staying in her home, even in the storage room. It's not proper." "I can leave," he offered, though the words felt like rocks in his mouth. "That's not what I want," Zara said, setting aside her mending. "But I need to know what you want, Tucker, why you're still here." Tucker set down his knife and the half-finished carving. "I've been asking myself the same question." He met her gaze directly. "I think I'm here because nowhere else feels right anymore." Zara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I care for you, Zara, and for William." Tucker ran a hand through his hair, struggling with words that had long gone unsaid. "When I rode through that blizzard, I was just doing what needed doing. Didn't expect to find whatever this is, whatever we've become." "And what have we become?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, something I never thought I'd have again. "A chance." Tucker moved from his chair to kneel before her. "I know it's soon. I know you're still grieving Jacob, and I respect that. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But I want you to know where I stand." Zara reached out, her fingers gently touching his cheek. "I loved my husband, part of me always will." She paused, her eyes searching his. "But what I feel for you, it's different, unexpected, and very real." Tucker covered her hand with his own. "I've got a small ranch east of town. Nothing fancy, but good land. Been working it alone, but it's enough for a family, if that's something you might want someday." Zara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Are you proposing, Tucker Xavier?" "Reckon I am," he said, his own voice rough with emotion. "Not very gracefully, I'm afraid." "I don't need grace," Zara said, "just honesty and time. William is still so new, and I'm just finding my footing again." Tucker nodded, understanding. "We've got time. I'm not going anywhere." He hesitated, then added, "Unless you want me to." In answer, Zara leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, tentative, but filled with promise. "Stay," she whispered against his mouth. "For now, just stay." As winter gave way to spring, the territory around Glenrio bloomed with new life. Wildflowers carpeted the plains, and the harsh landscape softened under warm sunshine. On the Olson homestead, other changes were taking place. Tucker had formally moved his belongings from his small ranch to Zara's cabin, though he maintained separate sleeping quarters out of respect for propriety. They had spoken to the preacher in town, who agreed to marry them in the summer, giving Zara the time she needed to honor her late husband's memory while embracing her future. The arrangement raised a few eyebrows in town, but most people understood the practical nature of frontier life. A widow with an infant and a homestead needed help. If that help came with the promise of marriage, all the better. William grew strong and healthy, his eyes the same honey brown as his mother's, his grip increasingly firm on Tucker's finger whenever the man held him. Tucker found himself falling easily into the role of father figure, singing old cavalry songs to soothe the baby to sleep, crafting toys from wood and leather, planning for a future where the boy would ride beside him checking cattle. One warm May morning, Tucker and Zara sat on the porch watching the sunrise. William dozed in a basket beside them, his tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. "I've been thinking," Tucker said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about our wedding." Zara glanced at him, a smile playing at her lips. "Having second thoughts, Mr. Xavier?" "Never," he assured her, taking her hand. "Just thinking we should combine our lands. My place has better water access and grazing. Your homestead has better soil for crops. Together, we'd have a proper ranch." Zara considered this. "And this cabin, I built it with Jacob. We keep it," Tucker said immediately. "Use it for storage, or someday, when William's older, it could be his own place." He squeezed her hand. "I wouldn't ask you to erase those memories, Zara." Gratitude and love shone in her eyes. "You're a good man, Tucker Xavier." "Just practical," he deflected. "Two properties are better than one in this country," but they both knew it was more than practicality. It was understanding, respect for what had come before, even as they built something new together. The weeks passed quickly. Tucker and Zara worked side by side, preparing for their shared future. They planted crops, repaired fences, and began construction on additions to Tucker's more substantial house to accommodate their growing family. William thrived, his personality emerging stubborn like his mother, observant like his surrogate father. News spread through the territory of the upcoming wedding. Gifts began arriving from townsfolk and distant neighbors' preserves, handmade quilts, a rocking chair carved by the blacksmith's father. The simple ceremony they had planned began to take on greater significance as the community embraced their union. In early June, a letter arrived that changed everything. Tucker returned from town with the mail, his expression troubled as he handed Zara an envelope bearing an official seal. "It's from the mining company," he explained as she opened it. William balanced on her hip. Zara read quickly, her face paling. "They're saying Jacob has an outstanding debt, that he borrowed against future wages to purchase equipment." She looked up, confused. "But that's not possible." "Jacob was careful with money. He never mentioned any debt." Tucker frowned. "How much are they claiming?" $300. Zara sank into a chair, the letter trembling in her hand. "Plus interest. They say if it's not paid within 30 days, they'll place a lien against the homestead." Tucker took the letter, reading it carefully. "This doesn't smell right. Did Jacob ever mention purchasing equipment from the company?" Zara shook her head. "Never. Any tools he used were his own or borrowed from neighbors. She bounced William absently as he fussed. This has to be a mistake. Or worse, Tucker said grimly. I've heard stories about the Silverton Mining Company. They've been buying up land all through the territory, sometimes by questionable means. You think they're trying to take the homestead? Alarm spread across Zara's face. But why? It's just a small parcel. Water rights, Tucker said after a moment's thought. Your property controls access to the creek that feeds the Eastern Valley. In a dry year, that's valuable. Determination replaced fear in Zara's expression. They can't have it. This land is William's inheritance. His father died working their mines. They owe him this much at least. Tucker nodded, a plan already forming. I'll ride into Santa Fe tomorrow. The Territorial Land Office will have records of any legitimate debts against the property, and I know a lawyer there who specializes in mining disputes. We can't afford a lawyer, Zara protested. We can't afford not to have one, Tucker countered. Besides, Joshua Richardson owes me a favor, saved his hide during a skirmish with Comanches years back. Zara adjusted William on her lap, her voice steady despite her worry. What about our wedding? It's in 3 weeks. Tucker took her hand, his expression grave but resolute. Some things can't wait. I'll be back in time, I promise. He smiled slightly. Nothing short of another blizzard could keep me from marrying you, Zara Olson. The journey to Santa Fe took 3 days of hard riding. Tucker pushed himself and midnight, stopping only when absolutely necessary for rest. The territorial capital was a bustling center of commerce and government, a stark contrast to the quiet plains around Glenrio. Joshua Richardson, a wiry man with spectacles and a surprisingly robust handshake, welcomed Tucker warmly to his cramped office near the governor's palace. Xavier, never thought I'd see you in civilized company again, the lawyer exclaimed. Last I heard you were raising hell with a cattle drive in the Panhandle. Those days are behind me, Tucker said, settling into a creaking chair. I've got land now, and soon a family. Richardson's eyebrows shot up. You, domesticated, this I have to hear. Tucker briefly related the events of the past 6 months, from the blizzard rescue to his engagement to Zara, before explaining the situation with the mining company's claim. Richardson's expression grew serious as he examined the letter. Silverton Mining, eh? They've been in my office before. Never on the right side of a dispute. He tapped the paper thoughtfully. This is thin on details. No dates for when the supposed loan was taken, no specifics on what equipment was purchased. So it's fabricated. Tucker leaned forward eagerly. I didn't say that, the lawyer cautioned. But it's suspicious. Let's check the territorial records first. If there was a legitimate debt, it would be registered there. The next day was spent poring over dusty record books in the land office. By evening, both men were convinced. No debt had ever been officially recorded against Jacob Olson's homestead. That doesn't mean he didn't borrow privately from the company, Richardson warned as they walked back to his office. But it does mean they can't legally place a lien without proving the debt's existence. How do they prove it? Tucker asked. They'd need documentation. A signed loan agreement, receipts for the equipment supposedly purchased, witnesses to the transaction. Tucker considered this. And if they can't produce those things, then their claim is worthless. Richardson adjusted his spectacles. But Tucker, these mining operations don't always play by the rules. They have money, influence. Sometimes they create evidence when needed. A chill ran through Tucker despite the warm evening. What do? We counterfile immediately, Richardson decided. Challenge them to produce documentation at a hearing before the territorial magistrate. That buys us time at least. The next morning, they submitted the necessary paperwork, officially contesting the mining company's claim. Richardson assured Tucker that this would prevent any immediate action against the homestead. "Go home to your bride," the lawyer advised. "I'll send word when a hearing is scheduled." It could be weeks, even months. The magistrate's calendar is always full. Tucker thanked his old friend and prepared to leave, his mind already racing with what he would tell Zara. As he was about to depart, Richardson called after him. "Xavier, one more thing. I'd look into this Jacob Olson's last days at the mine. Talk to his co-workers, his supervisor. Something doesn't add up." The return journey to Glenrio seemed even longer than the trip out. Tucker's thoughts were consumed with the threat hanging over Zara's homestead and, by extension, their future together. By the time he reached the cabin 5 days after his departure, he was exhausted but determined. Zara ran to him as he dismounted, William secure in her arms. The baby had grown even in the short time Tucker had been gone, his face more alert, his tiny hands reaching. "What did you find out?" Zara asked after their embrace, searching his face for answers. Tucker explained everything as they sat at the kitchen table, William playing with wooden blocks on a blanket nearby. Zara's expression hardened when he described the lawyer's suspicions. "Jacob wouldn't have hidden a debt from me," she said firmly. "We shared everything. If he needed money, he would have told me." "I believe you," Tucker assured her, "which means the mining company is trying to swindle you out of this land." Zara's jaw set in a determined line. "They'll find I'm not easily swindled." The following day, Tucker rode into Glenrio to speak with Sheriff Mills about the situation. The lawman listened carefully, then nodded grimly. "Can't say I'm surprised. Silverton's got a reputation. They've been buying up water rights all through the territory." He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "There was talk a few months back about a new smelter they're planning. Would need a steady water supply. Like the creek that runs through Zara's property," Tucker concluded. "Exactly." The sheriff leaned forward. "I'll tell you something else. Jacob Olson wasn't the only miner who died in that cave-in. 3 others were killed, and all had small land holdings in the same watershed." Tucker's blood ran cold. "You think it wasn't an accident?" Mills spread his hands. "I've got no proof of that. Just find it mighty coincidental." Armed with this disturbing information, Tucker decided to visit the Silver Cup mine where Jacob had worked. Located in the foothills about 15 miles northwest of Glenrio, it was a day's ride each way. Zara insisted on accompanying him. "Jacob was my husband," she said firmly. "If someone knows something about his death or this supposed debt, I have a right to hear it firsthand." They arranged for Mrs. Holloway to care for William overnight and set out early the next morning. The journey was pleasant despite their grim purpose. The summer landscape lush after spring rains, wildflowers dotting the prairie. The Silver Cup mine was larger than Tucker had expected, with numerous outbuildings surrounding the main shaft entrance. Dozens of men moved about, some emerging from the earth covered in dust, others pushing carts of ore toward a crushing facility. Tucker helped Zara dismount, conscious of the curious stares they attracted. A foreman approached, wiping his hands on a filthy rag. "Help you folks?" he asked, eyeing them suspiciously. "I'm Zara Olson," she said directly, "Jacob Olson's widow. We're here about a claim the company has made against our property." The foreman's expression shuddered. "You'll want to talk to Mr. Hargrove in the office. I don't handle company business." He pointed them toward a small wooden building set apart from the others. As they walked away, Tucker noticed the foreman watching them intently. The office was sparsely furnished but meticulously organized. A thin man with a pencil mustache sat behind a desk, tallying figures in a ledger. He looked up as they entered, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Hargrove?" Tucker inquired. I'm Tucker Xavier, and this is Zara Olson. We're here about a debt notice sent to Mrs. Olson regarding her late husband." Hargrove closed his ledger slowly. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Olson. I was wondering when we'd hear from you." His tone was oily, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Please sit down." They remained standing. Zara stepped forward, placing the letter on his desk. "This claim is false," she stated flatly. "My husband never borrowed money from the mining company. We've checked the territorial records. There's no registered debt against our homestead." Hargrove's smile tightened. "Not all transactions are officially recorded, Mrs. Olson. Your husband approached the company privately. We have documentation." He opened a drawer and withdrew a folded paper. His signature, quite clear. Tucker took the document, examining it carefully. It appeared to be a loan agreement for mining equipment, dated 2 months before Jacob's death, with a signature at the bottom. "This isn't Jacob's handwriting," Zara said immediately, looking over Tucker's shoulder. "I know his signature. This is forged." Hargrove's expression hardened. "Are you accusing the company of fraud, Mrs. Olson? That's a serious allegation." "No more serious than falsely claiming a debt against a widow's property," Tucker interjected, his voice level but dangerous. "The company is merely protecting its interests," Hargrove said smoothly. "Mr. Olson borrowed money. The debt must be settled." "We'll see what the territorial magistrate has to say about that," Tucker replied, tucking the document into his coat. "Our lawyer will want to examine this forgery." Hargrove stood abruptly. "That document is company property. It concerns my husband," Zara said, her voice steady despite her anger. "We're taking it to be verified." The mine manager's face flushed with anger. "This is theft." "I'll have the sheriff." "Please do involve Sheriff Mills," Tucker interrupted. "He's very interested in the coincidence of 4 property owners dying in the same cave-in, all with land along the same creek." Hargrove went still. "That was a tragic accident. Investigations proved it." "Company investigations," Tucker noted. "Convenient." A tense silence filled the office. Finally, Hargrove sank back into his chair. "Take the document," he said stiffly. "It won't change anything. The company will pursue its claim." Outside, Tucker and Zara mounted their horses quickly, aware of the hostile eyes following them. They rode in silence until the mine was well behind them. "They killed him," Zara said finally, her voice hollow. "They killed Jacob for his land." Tucker reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "We don't know that for certain, but we'll find out the truth, I promise you." They made camp that night beside a small stream, neither wanting to ride after dark in potentially hostile territory. As they sat beside the fire, Zara stared into the flames, her expression distant. "I keep thinking about his last day," she said softly. "Jacob was happy that morning, said he had good news, something he'd tell me when he got home." A tear slid down her cheek. "He never came home." Tucker moved to sit beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Zara, for all of it." She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "He would have liked you, you know. Jacob wasn't the jealous type. He would have been grateful that I found someone to care for William and me." Tucker pressed a kiss to her temple. "I wish I could have known him. Any man who earned your love must have been exceptional." They sat together in silence until the fire burned low. When they finally sought their bedrolls, Tucker noticed Zara had removed her wedding ring, the one that had belonged to Jacob, and placed it carefully in a small pouch around her neck. A symbolic gesture, he realized. Not forgetting the past, but making room for the future. The next morning, they decided to visit the town nearest the mine. Silver Bend was little more than a collection of rough buildings serving the needs of miners: a saloon, a general store, a makeshift boarding house. Tucker hoped they might find some of Jacob's former co-workers, men who might know something about his final days. The saloon was nearly empty when they entered, too early for the regular crowd. An old man swept the floor while the bartender arranged glasses. "Madam," the bartender nodded to Zara, clearly surprised to see a woman in his establishment. "What can I do for you folks?" "Information," Tucker said, placing a silver dollar on the bar. "About Jacob Olson. Died in the cave-in at Silver Cup 6 months back." The bartender's eyes darted to the coin, then to the door as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Don't know much about that business. Terrible tragedy." "You're lying," Zara said calmly. "This is a small town. Everyone knows everything. Jacob drank here after his shifts. You knew him." The man sighed, taking the coin. "Look, I like Jacob. Good customer, never caused trouble. But asking questions about that cave-in is dangerous. Company has ears everywhere." "We need to know," Tucker pressed. "Was there anything unusual in the days before the accident?" The bartender hesitated, then leaned closer. "He argued with Hargrove, right here at the bar. 2 nights before it happened, something about his property refusing to sell." He straightened, his voice returning to normal volume. "That's all I know. Now please drink something or move along. I got a business to run." They ordered coffee they didn't want, then approached the old man sweeping the floor. He was more forthcoming, having less to lose. "I was a blaster at Silver Cup for 20 years before my lungs gave out," he told them between hacking coughs. "That cave-in weren't no accident. Wrong section of the mine entirely for a natural collapse." He tapped his temple. "They wanted those men dead. All had water rights the company wanted. But why not just continue pressuring them to sell?" Tucker asked. The old man's laugh turned into another coughing fit. "Some men can't be pressured. Your husband," he nodded to Zara, "was organizing the others. They were planning to file a complaint with the territorial governor about the company's tactics." He shook his head. "Dead men file no complaints." By the time they left Silver Bend, both were convinced. Jacob and the others had been murdered, and now the company was using forged debt to steal Zara's land. The question was how to prove it and how to stop them. They returned to Glenrio the following day and immediately sent a detailed letter to Joshua Richardson in Santa Fe, including the forged loan document and the information they'd gathered. The lawyer's reply came a week later, brought by special messenger. "Evidence of murder would change everything," Richardson wrote, "but proving it is another matter entirely. Mining accidents are common, and the company conducted its own investigation, which naturally found no wrongdoing. As for the forged document, I've compared it with samples of real signatures from the territorial records. It's clearly not the same hand, but forgery is difficult to prove in court without the victim alive to testify." The letter concluded with a recommendation to gather more evidence and a promise that Richardson would request an expedited hearing before the magistrate. "So we wait?" Zara asked, frustration evident in her voice as she folded the letter. "While they plot to take our land." Tucker paced the small cabin, thinking hard. "Not exactly. Richardson's right, we need more evidence." He turned to her, determination in his eyes. "We need to find the other widows from the cave-in, if their husbands were also facing pressure to sell, and if they've received similar debt notices." "A pattern," Zara concluded. "That could convince the magistrate." The next day, Sheriff Mills provided them with the names and last known locations of the other miners' widows. One had already sold her property and moved away. Another had remarried and relocated to California. But the third, Eleanor Jenkins, still lived on her homestead about 30 miles south of Glenrio. Their wedding was now just 2 weeks away, but both agreed this couldn't wait. They set out the following morning, William securely bundled for the journey. The Jenkins homestead was smaller than Zara's, the land more arid but neatly maintained. A woman of about 40 met them at the door, rifle in hand. "State your business," she called, not lowering the weapon. Tucker raised his hands to show they meant no harm. "Mrs. Jenkins." "I'm Tucker Xavier. This is Zara Olson. Her husband died in the same cave-in as yours. We need to talk to you about Silverton Mining Company." Eleanor Jenkins studied them for a long moment, then slowly lowered the rifle. "You'd better come inside." Over coffee, they shared what they'd learned. Eleanor listened intently, her weathered face growing harder with each detail. "They sent me a debt notice, too," she confirmed, retrieving a letter identical to Zara's from a drawer. "Claimed Thomas borrowed money for new tools. $300, same as yours." She laughed bitterly. "Thomas couldn't even write his name, let alone sign a loan document. He used an X for his mark." "Did they provide proof?" Tucker asked. "A paper with his signature on it. Clear forgery." She shook her head. "I told them where they could put their notice. Next week, 2 men came by. Said accidents happen to stubborn widows just like they happen to stubborn miners." Zara gasped. "They threatened you, plain as day." Eleanor's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Been sleeping with this rifle ever since." "Why didn't you report it to the sheriff?" Tucker asked. "And say what?" 2 men whose names I don't know made a vague threat. Besides, Sheriff Billings in these parts is in the company's pocket." She looked at them intently. "Thomas told me something was wrong at the mine, said he and some others were going to speak out. Next thing I know, he's dead in an accident." "Jacob said the same thing," Zara said softly. "That he had news to tell me." Eleanor nodded. "They were working together. Thomas, your Jacob, and the other 2. They found something, some proof of the company's wrongdoing." "What exactly?" Thomas never said. She sighed heavily. "Whatever it was, they took it to their graves. Or perhaps not," Tucker thought. If the men had discovered evidence, they might have hidden it somewhere. But where would a miner conceal something important? Somewhere safe, accessible. "The claims office," he said suddenly. "Every miner files claims paperwork. Could they have hidden something there?" Eleanor considered this. "It's possible. The Territorial Claims Office keeps records of all mining claims. If they found evidence of the company jumping claims or falsifying surveys, that would explain why the company is so desperate to get control of the land," Zara concluded. "They're hiding something bigger than water rights." They left the Jenkins homestead with a promise to share any information they uncovered, and a pledge from Eleanor to testify about the threats and forge debt notice if needed. On the ride home, Tucker was quiet, formulating a plan. The Territorial Claims Office in Santa Fe would have copies of all mining records, he said finally, but getting there and back before our wedding would be tight. Zara reached across to touch his arm. "The wedding can wait if necessary. This can't." Tucker shook his head firmly. "I made a promise. We'll be married on the date we set." He smiled slightly. "But perhaps our honeymoon could include a trip to Santa Fe." 2 days before the wedding, another letter arrived from Joshua Richardson. The magistrate had scheduled a hearing for the first week of July, just after their planned honeymoon. More concerning was Richardson's warning. He'd heard rumors that Silverton Mining was preparing to take more direct action against holdout landowners. "They're getting desperate," Tucker observed as they discussed the letter that evening. William slept peacefully in his cradle, oblivious to the adults' concerns. "If they think we're close to uncovering something." "What can we do?" Zara asked, worry evident in her voice. Tucker considered their options. "For now, we get married. Then we go to Santa Fe as planned and search those records. If we find something, we take it straight to the magistrate." He took her hand. "I won't let them take what's yours, Zara. What's ours?" The wedding day dawned clear and warm, a perfect June morning. The ceremony was held outdoors, under a cottonwood tree on Tucker's property, soon to be their shared home. Nearly everyone from Glenrio attended, along with neighbors from surrounding homesteads. Even Alina Jenkins made the journey, standing proudly with Zara as she prepared to walk to her waiting groom. "You look beautiful," Alina told her, adjusting the simple veil. "Your Jacob would approve, you know, of this day of Tucker, of you finding happiness again." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "Thank you for saying that." Alina patted her hand. "Now go on. That man's been watching this tent like he's afraid you might change your mind." Zara laughed, picked up William from his basket and stepped out into the sunshine. Tucker waited beneath the tree, looking more handsome than she'd ever seen him in a new suit and polished boots. His face, usually so composed, lit up at the sight of her in her cream-colored dress, William in her arms. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple vows and rings. Tucker had insisted on buying Zara a new one, not to replace the one from Jacob that she still wore on a chain, but to symbolize their own beginning. "I promise to cherish you and William," Tucker said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "To build a life with you, to protect you with everything I am, and to love you until my last breath." Zara's response was equally moving. "I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to make a home with you, to raise William to know your goodness, and to love you with my whole heart, now and always." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Tucker kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to more eyes than just Zara's. The celebration afterward was joyous food and music, and dancing lasting well into the evening. As the sun began to set, the newlyweds slipped away from the festivities. Mrs. Holloway had offered to care for William overnight, giving them their first night truly alone together. Tucker had prepared the master bedroom in his house, now their house with fresh linens and wildflowers. Standing in the doorway, Zara felt a sudden shyness. Though they had lived in close quarters for months, this step was significant. Tucker seemed to sense her hesitation. "We have all the time in the world," he said softly, taking her hand. "Tonight and all the nights to come." His gentleness broke through her nervousness. Zara stepped into his arms, raising her face to his. "I love you, Tucker Xavier. Thank you for riding through a blizzard to find me." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips, before kissing her with a passion that had been carefully restrained until now. That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their union as natural and right as if they had been meant for each other from the beginning. Afterward, lying in his arms, Zara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before Jacob's death. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That happiness can come from the most unexpected places," she replied. "A year ago, I couldn't imagine feeling this way again. Then a blizzard brought you to my door." Tucker kissed her forehead. "I was lost before I found you, just didn't know it." They set out for Santa Fe 2 days later, William traveling with them. The journey was slower with an infant, but they were in no rush, enjoying the time together as a new family. They arrived in the territorial capital 5 days after their wedding and went directly to Joshua Richardson's office. The lawyer was delighted to see them. "Congratulations on your marriage." Though I must say, most couples choose less contentious activities for their honeymoon than challenging a powerful mining company. Tucker laughed. "We're not most couples." Richardson became serious. "I've been doing some digging. Silverton Mining has filed eviction notices against 3 other families along the same watershed as your properties. They're moving quickly, which suggests whatever they're hiding, it's significant. We need to see the mining claim records," Zara explained. "We think Jacob and the others may have discovered something there." The Territorial Claims Office was located in a stone building near the governor's palace. The clerk was initially reluctant to grant them access to the records, but Richardson's legal credentials and a small donation to the clerk's favorite charity loosened the bureaucratic barriers. For 2 days, they pored over dusty record books and file boxes, searching for anything related to the Silver Cup mine and surrounding claims. It was tedious work, made more challenging by William's occasional demands for attention. On the 3rd day, Tucker found something unusual. "Look at this," he called to Zara and Richardson. "The survey maps for the Silver Cup area. There's an inconsistency." He pointed to 2 different maps, dated 6 months apart. This earlier one shows a creek running through the north section. The later one doesn't show it at all. Richardson adjusted his spectacles. "That's odd. Water features don't simply disappear." "Unless someone wanted to hide them," Zara suggested. "A water source on a mining claim increases its value." They dug deeper, pulling all files related to the Silver Cup. What emerged was a pattern of deception spanning years. Silverton Mining had systematically falsified surveys, jumped claims belonging to independent miners, and bribed officials to look the other way. "This explains why they're so desperate to control the watershed," Tucker said as they pieced it together. "They've been using water from the creek to process ore at their smelter. If anyone discovered, they don't actually have legal rights to that water." "They could lose everything," Richardson finished. "Mining without proper water rights is illegal. Every ounce of silver they've extracted could be subject to penalties." "And Jacob found proof of this," Zara said, her voice tight with emotion. "That's why they killed him and the others." Richardson gathered the most damning documents. "This is enough to bring before the magistrate, not just to dismiss their claim against your property, but potentially to file criminal charges against the company." They left the claims office with copies of the key records, Richardson having persuaded the clerk to authenticate them for a further donation. That evening, as they prepared to return to their hotel, a boy delivered a message to their room. "Urgent," he said, handing the folded paper to Tucker. "Man said to deliver it right away." Tucker opened it, his expression darkening as he read. "It's from Sheriff Mills. Hargrove and some company men were seen heading toward our properties. He thinks they're planning something." Zara clutched William closer. "We have to go back. Now." They left Santa Fe that night, traveling as quickly as possible with an infant. Richardson promised to present their evidence to the magistrate immediately and request an injunction against the company. The journey back to Glenrio was tense, each of them acutely aware that their discovery had likely put them in greater danger. They pushed themselves and their horses, stopping only when absolutely necessary for William's sake. 4 days later, they crested the final rise before Tucker's ranch. What they saw made their blood run cold. Smoke rose from where the house should be. Even from a distance, they could see the charred remains of the structure they had left just over a week earlier. "No," Zara whispered, her face pale with shock. Tucker spurred his horse forward, Zara close behind. The destruction was complete. The house burned to the foundation, the barn partially collapsed, livestock scattered or stolen. Only the well house remained untouched, its stone construction resistant to the flames. "Who would do this?" Zara asked, though they both knew the answer. Tucker dismounted, his face hard with anger as he surveyed the ruins of what should have been their home. "They're sending a message, trying to scare us off before the hearing." A horse approached from the direction of town. Sheriff Mills reined in beside them, his expression grim. "Got here as fast as I could," he said. "Happened 2 nights ago. Some of the neighbors tried to save what they could, but the fire was too intense." "Hargrove?" Tucker asked. The sheriff nodded. Him and 4 company men, they didn't even try to hide it. Rode right through town beforehand, making sure folks saw them heading this way. His hand rested on his pistol. Said they were just going to talk to you about the claim. Talk with torches, Zara said bitterly, adjusting William in her arms. The baby, sensing the tension, began to fuss. They hit Alina Jenkins' place too, Mills continued. Burned her barn, shot her livestock. She's staying in town now, too afraid to go back. Tucker's jaw clenched. And Zara's homestead, untouched far as I know. I sent Ben Parker out to keep watch on it. Tucker and Zara exchanged looks. We should go there, she said. At least we'll have shelter. Mills shook his head. They're watching it, waiting for you to return. I wouldn't recommend walking into that trap. So we hide. Tucker's voice held a dangerous edge. While they destroy everything we've built. No, the sheriff said firmly. You come to town where I can protect you until the hearing. Richardson telegraphed. The magistrate has granted an emergency injunction against Silverton based on your evidence. He's riding here personally to hold the hearing in 3 days. Relief and worry warred within Zara. What if they don't care about the injunction? They've already shown they're willing to break the law. That's why you'll stay at the jailhouse, Mills replied. Only place in town with stone walls and a sturdy lock. I've already arranged it. Tucker clearly didn't like the idea of retreat, but one look at Zara and William convinced him. All right, but this isn't over. For the next 3 days, they lived in the sheriff's office and adjoining jail cells, which had been hastily converted into living quarters. The town rallied around them, bringing food, clothes, and necessities for William. Alina Jenkins joined them, her determined presence a reminder of what they were fighting for. Tucker chafed at the confinement, pacing like a caged animal. They're out there, probably destroying Zara's homestead as we speak. Ben Parker's still watching it, Mills assured him. Sent word this morning. It's untouched so far. Because they know that's where we'd go, Zara said, bouncing William on her knee. They're waiting for us. The day before the magistrate was due to arrive, a commotion outside drew them to the window. A group of miners, at least 20 men, had gathered in the street, led by none other than Hargrove himself. Xavier, he shouted, his voice carrying easily to the jailhouse. Come out and face me like a man. Or are you hiding behind a woman's skirts? Tucker moved toward the door, but Sheriff Mills blocked his path. That's what they want. Get you out there, start a fight, kill you in self-defense. Don't play into their hands. Hargrove continued his taunts, growing more insulting by the minute. The crowd of miners, many clearly reluctant participants, shifted uncomfortably. Thought you were smarter than this, Hargrove? Mills called from the jailhouse door, rifle in hand. Threatening witnesses before a federal hearing. That's a good way to end up in a territorial prison. The mine manager's face contorted with rage. There won't be any hearing if the witnesses don't live to testify. He turned to his men. Burn them out. $20 to the man who puts a bullet in Xavier's head. The miners didn't move. One by one, they began to back away from Hargrove. You cowards, he raged. Don't you understand? If this goes to hearing, the mine will be shut down. You'll all lose your jobs. Better unemployed than hanged for murder, one miner muttered, walking away. Within minutes, Hargrove stood alone in the street, abandoned by men who had finally found a line they wouldn't cross. With a final curse, he mounted his horse and rode out of town at a gallop. Where's he going? Zara asked, watching from the window. Tucker and Mills exchanged grim looks. The homestead, they said in unison. He's desperate now, Tucker added. Knows his men won't help him, but he can still do plenty of damage alone. Mills quickly deputized Tucker and 3 reliable townsmen. We'll ride for the Olson place. If Hargrove's there, we'll arrest him. If not, we'll secure the property until the magistrate arrives. Zara insisted on accompanying them. "It's my home. I'm not hiding while he destroys it." Though reluctant, Tucker knew better than to argue with his wife when that determined look settled on her face. They arranged for Mrs. Holloway to care for William and set out, 6 riders strong, toward the homestead that had started it all. They approached cautiously, using a ridge line for cover. At first glance, the small cabin appeared untouched, smoke rising normally from the chimney. "Someone's there," Mills observed. "Making themselves at home." They dismounted and advanced on foot, spreading out to surround the cabin. As they drew closer, they could hear movement inside a single person, judging by the footsteps. Mills called out, "Hargrove, this is Sheriff Mills. Come out with your hands visible." Silence, then a crash as something was overturned inside. A shot rang out, splintering wood near Mills' head. "That answers that question," the sheriff muttered, ducking behind a water trough. "Zara, stay back," Tucker ordered, positioning her behind the well house before drawing his own revolver. "We don't know what he's planning." "You think I'm giving up?" Hargrove shouted from inside. "You think I'm going to prison because some widow couldn't mind her own business? I'll burn this place to the ground first." "The magistrate has already seen the evidence," Mills called back. "Destroying the homestead won't change anything now." A wild laugh was Hargrove's only response, followed by the distinctive sound of breaking glass and the strong odor of lamp oil. "He's going to set fire to the cabin," one of the deputies said urgently. Tucker's mind raced. The cabin that had sheltered Zara, where William had been born, where he had first begun to love them both, he couldn't let it be destroyed like his own home. "Cover me," he said to Mills. Then, before anyone could stop him, he dashed toward the back of the cabin where a small window led to the storage room. More shots rang out as Hargrove fired blindly through the front door. Tucker reached the window unnoticed, peered inside, and saw his opportunity. The mine manager was focused on the front, a lamp in one hand, revolver in the other. Tucker smashed the window with his pistol butt and lunged through the opening in one fluid motion. Hargrove whirled at the sound, firing wildly. The bullet grazed Tucker's arm, but momentum carried him forward, tackling the mine manager to the floor. The lamp shattered, oil spreading but thankfully not igniting. They struggled fiercely, each man fighting with the desperation of knowing what was at stake. Hargrove was smaller but fueled by a madman's strength. He managed to slam his pistol into Tucker's temple, momentarily stunning him. "I should have killed you instead of burning your ranch," Hargrove snarled, bringing the weapon around for a killing shot. Before he could fire, the cabin door burst open. Zara stood framed in the doorway, Jacob's old shotgun raised and steady in her hands. "Drop it," she commanded, her voice like steel, "or I'll make William an orphan twice over." Something in her eyes, perhaps the same determination that had brought her through childbirth in a blizzard, through widowhood, through every hardship life had thrown at her, convinced Hargrove she meant it. His weapon clattered to the floor. Sheriff Mills and the deputies rushed in, securing the mine manager with handcuffs. As they led him away, Hargrove spat at Zara's feet. "You'll regret this," he threatened. "The company has resources you can't imagine. They'll ruin you." Zara regarded him calmly. "The company will be too busy defending itself in court to worry about us. Your employers abandoned you, Mr. Hargrove, just like your miners did. That should tell you something." When the others had gone, taking Hargrove to a cell in Glenrio, Tucker and Zara remained in the cabin. He examined the space, noting with relief that other than the broken window and spilled lamp oil, little damage had been done. "That was a foolish risk," he told her, wincing as she bandaged his grazed arm. "Confronting an armed man." "Says the man who jumped through a window to tackle him," Zara countered, tying off the bandage. Besides, I learned from the best. A certain cowboy who rode through a blizzard to deliver a baby. Tucker smiled ruefully. Fair point. They spent the night in the cabin, its familiar walls a comfort after the tension of recent days. In the morning, they rode back to town to collect William and await the magistrate's arrival. The hearing was held in the town's small church, the only building in Glenrio large enough to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. Judge Horace Fleming, a stern-faced man with a reputation for fairness, presided from behind a makeshift bench. Joshua Richardson presented their case methodically, laying out the evidence of Silverton Mining's fraud, threats, and violent actions. Zara, Tucker, and Alina Jenkins each testified about their experiences. The falsified documents were entered into evidence, along with the mining records that proved the company's water rights deception. The company's lawyer, a slick man from Denver, tried to dismiss the evidence as circumstantial, the testimonies as the exaggerations of grieving widows. But when confronted with the authenticated territorial records, his arguments faltered. Judge Fleming's ruling was decisive. This court finds that Silverton Mining Company has engaged in a pattern of fraud, intimidation, and criminal activity, he declared. The debt claims against the Olson and Jenkins properties are dismissed as fraudulent. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into the cave-in that killed Jacob Olson and 3 others, as well as the company's business practices throughout the territory. He looked directly at Tucker and Zara. Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, Mrs. Jenkins, this court recognizes the hardships you have endured. The law provides for damages in such cases. I am awarding each of you compensation of $1,000 to be paid by Silverton Mining Company within 30 days. A cheer went up from the townspeople. Hargrove, seated in chains at the company table, looked as though he might be ill. The judge continued. Additionally, Mr. Hargrove is remanded to territorial custody on charges of arson, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He will be transported to Santa Fe to await trial. As the proceedings concluded, Tucker wrapped an arm around Zara's shoulders, William sleeping peacefully in her arms despite the commotion. It's over, he said softly. Truly over. Zara leaned against him. Justice for Jacob and the others. And a future for us. The aftermath of the hearing brought significant changes to Glenrio and the surrounding area. Silverton Mining Company, facing multiple investigations and lawsuits, eventually declared bankruptcy. The Silver Cup mine was sold to a cooperative of local miners, who operated it with greater safety standards and fair practices. With the compensation money and a loan from the Territorial Bank, Tucker and Zara rebuilt the burned ranch house, larger and sturdier than before. They combined operations between their 2 properties, developing a successful cattle business on Tucker's land while growing crops on Zara's fertile acres. The cabin where William had been born remained standing, used occasionally as a guest house, but mostly preserved as a reminder of where their story had begun. 2 years after the blizzard that had brought them together, Zara gave birth to a daughter, whom they named Alina Elizabeth after Tucker's first wife, Alina after their stalwart friend, who had stood with them against Silverton. On the night of the birth, considerably easier than William's dramatic arrival, Tucker stood by the bedroom window, cradling his newborn daughter while Zara rested. William, now a sturdy toddler, slept in his small bed across the room. "Look at that little one," Tucker whispered, pointing to the falling snow outside. "Seems fitting you'd arrive during the first snowfall of the year. Your brother came in a blizzard too, you know. That's when I first met your mama." He glanced at Zara, thinking she was asleep, but found her watching him with eyes full of love. best blizzard of my life," she said softly. "Brought me the man who would become the father of my children." Tucker crossed to her bedside, carefully sitting beside her with Elizabeth still in his arms. "I used to think that riding through that storm was the bravest thing I'd ever done. Now I know better." He looked at their daughter, then at William, then back at his wife. "The brave thing was letting myself love again, letting myself build a family with you." Zara reached up to touch his cheek. "We built it together, through storms literal and figurative." Outside, the snow continued to fall. Not a raging blizzard this time, but a gentle, steady descent that would transform the landscape by morning. Inside, sheltered by strong walls and stronger love, the Xavier family rested secure in the knowledge that whatever storms life might bring, they would weather them together.